Well, good morning to you all, and happy 2017 to all of you out at our Madras campus, as well as those of you who are watching online. We're so glad you joined in with us today. And if you're watching online, maybe your 2017 resolution could be to join us at one of our campuses. We would love to have you. Now, we're less than 24 hours into the new year, so hopefully none of you have already broken your New Year's resolutions, but I have good news for you, especially if you don't like New Year's resolutions. Since it's New Year's Day, you only have about 3 weeks left of actually pretending like you care about getting those New Year's resolutions done and bettering yourself as a human being, so do not despair. We'll get through this together. Now, I think I've decided that my New Year's resolution this year is going to be to look less and less like our senior pastor, Ed Martin. That's a picture of us right there. And ever since I was a kid, everyone told me how much I looked like my dad. Even strangers in like the supermarket would come up and be like, "You look just like your dad." And I'd go, "That's not my dad. I need help." And I'd run away and we'd laugh and laugh with the police officer. But a few years ago, I started growing this beard, and I think I'm just going to keep growing it out, try and look less like him and get weird with it, real Gandalf the Grey-like. But you know what we all know about New Year's resolutions, and yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about New Year's resolutions today. Besides the fact that we usually pick things that we think are good for us, we think it's going to better us, we're going to quit smoking or lose some weight or pay off a debt, the one thing most of us think about when we think about New Year's resolutions is we're not going to keep them. I'm sure some of us have kept one or two in our lifetime. If you're very disciplined, you might have kept even more than that. Or if you're like me, you've kept none of your New Year's resolutions. Sure, maybe for a month or two, or maybe 3, maybe even 6 whole months. But by the end of the year, you've completely given up on ever actually changing and bettering yourself because it's too much work. And we all get that. And the reason why that happens and the reason why we give up on these New Year's resolutions is actually what I want to spend my time talking about to you today. The reason why it's hard for us to do these self-improvement plans and stick to our New Year's resolutions. And the reason why is because we naturally drift away from anything that is good and healthy or holy or wholesome for us. And I know that doesn't sound necessarily too profound, and trust me, it's going to get less so. But think about it. Anytime we want to improve ourselves, anytime we want to make things better in our health or our finances or our relational world, anytime we want to lose that weight or pay off that debt, anytime we want to spend less time at work and more time with our families, anytime we want to work on our marriage or our anger, anytime we want to deal with a difficult friendship or with a difficult boss, anytime we want to do anything that matters, it takes work. It feels like we're swimming upstream, swimming against this current that wants to drift us away from what's good for us. I'll give you an example. It's easier for me to eat a chocolate cake, and notice I didn't say a piece of chocolate cake, I mean an entire chocolate cake in one sitting, than it is for me to go to the gym. It's easier for me to sleep in extra 15 minutes in the morning than it is for me to spend time in my relationship with God, which is something I say is important to me. It's easier for me to waste money on things I don't need than it is to save that money or pay off a debt. It's easier for me to do things that aren't good for me than it is for me to do things that are bad, to do things that are good for me. And the reason why is what our key phrase is for today. So I want you to hold on to this. If it is good for us, we drift from it. If it is good for us, we drift from it. Now, this isn't anything that you didn't know. This isn't anything that you haven't even thought about. Now, you may never verbalized it the way that I did, but you felt it before. It's why that you can't complete these New Year's resolutions. It's why you know that that's not going to happen. The reason why is because it always feels like we're swimming against a current that is pulling us away. And it's just easier to drift. It's easier to be pulled away from what is good for us. And the reason this is so dangerous is because the drift is subtle. We don't see it right away. The things we drift from, they don't feel like pressing needs. Now, they are pressing needs. And 10 years from now, well, I can see that. 20 pounds from now, I can see that. In my next marriage, I can see I should have put some work in that. In my next job, I can see it. When the bill comes in the mail, I see, yeah, that really mattered. But in the moment, I can't feel it. I don't see it. And if I could, things would probably be different. You know, if every time I went back for seconds, I gained 4 pounds like that. You know, if the next time I went back for an extra pint of ice cream, I gained 4 pounds like that, well, I might hesitate. But when the diet gods don't strike me down after I eat the first pint of ice cream, I'm like, must be fate. I'm supposed to eat the next one. Or if every time I lost my temper with somebody, I could see the damage that I was doing to them. I could somehow actually see it. I might actually think through what I said. Or if every time I stayed late at work instead of coming home on time, I could see the strain I was putting on my marriage or my relationship with my kids. Things might be different, but that's not how it works. And so what ends up happening is I begin lying to myself. I begin rationalizing my behavior. I say things like, well, today's a cheat day, so I can be a little bad. You know, Monday through Friday is a cheat day, and Saturday and Sundays are weekends, so they definitely don't count. Or I say things like, look, I know we're trying to save money, and I shouldn't be making these extravagant purchases, but I kind of want this car. I know I don't need it, but think about it this way. It's better on gas mileage, and it's a sale. It must be fate. You know, it's President's Day. I have to celebrate. I'd kind of be stupid if I didn't buy it. We begin rationalizing. We begin saying things like, I know I shouldn't lose my temper, but, well, that's just the way I'm wired up. You know, that's just the way my dad was, and that's just the way I live my life. And see, when you say that, well, I can see in you that you're rationalizing and you're making excuses, but in me, I can lie to me all day long. And the problem is this drift doesn't just happen in New Year's resolutions and diets and self-improvement plans. It happens in our convictions. It happens in our beliefs, those deeply held values that we say are core to us as a person. You know, those things that, we all have things that we say at some point, I'll never do that, or I'll always do that. I'll never be that dad. I'll never be that husband. I'll always be that coworker. I'll always be that friend. But the more you live, the more you begin to realize those things aren't never and always. You know, if you put me in the wrong situation, you put just enough pressure and stress on my life, put me around the wrong kind of person, put me in the wrong mood, I'll drift away from those things that I say really matter to me, and they won't be never and always. I'll drift, and I don't like it, and I'm not proud of it, but that's what I'll do. This became very apparent to me when I became a parent, and those words sound very close together. I don't know why I chose to say it that way, but it became very apparent to me when I became a parent. My wife and I have a 6-month-old daughter named Corinne, and I chose to show a picture of her. Mainly I'm choosing this illustration just so I can show a picture of her. But there are things when we had her that I said, I'm never going to be that kind of dad, or I'm always going to be that kind of dad. I'm always going to do this. But even in the 6 months since she's been alive, I've seen myself drifting from what I said mattered most to me. And I'm not proud of it, but I can see the drift happening in me. You know, I would say things all the time like, I don't want to be the kind of dad who spends more time at work than I do with my family. I don't want to be the kind of dad who's constantly staying late at work or bringing work home, or I don't want to be the dad who veges out on the couch. But even just 6 months into this thing, I'm seeing it happening, you know? When I'm behind on a project, or a deadline's coming up, or it's a busy season, it's natural. It just seems easy to me to stay late at work or to bring work home and sit there working while my daughter's playing on the floor. Or if I've had a stressful day, things didn't go my way, and I'm out of energy, it's so much easier for me to just veg out on the couch than to spend the energy to actually get down and spend time with her. And it's so easy to rationalize that behavior. It's so easy for me to say, well, it's just tonight. You know, or it's just this time of the year, or when I get past this project, things will be different. Or, you know, today was just a hard day, so it's okay. She's only 6 months old, but what anyone who has a kid knows, 6 months to 16 years old can happen like that. And I'm missing out on it. All the while my daughter's growing up, I'm drifting towards work. And the truth is, this isn't something I saw in myself. we never see the drift in ourselves. Luckily, I have a very loving wife who very lovingly approached me and just said, hey, you said you didn't want to be this guy. You're being this guy. And I know it's not a big deal right now. I get that, but it will be one day. Can we fix this? And the reason this happens is because the current of life rarely takes us in the right direction. The current of life does not naturally move me in the direction of being a more attentive father. I don't naturally drift to being a better husband. I don't naturally drift to dealing with my anger or my lust. I don't naturally drift towards better relationships with my coworkers, my family, my friends. I don't even naturally drift towards a better relationship with the God I follow. And if you're a follower of Christ, and you're here today on New Year's Day, this matters to you. But you need to be aware, and you probably already are. You're not going to naturally just drift towards a better relationship with God. It's always going to take effort. It's always going to take intentionality. In anything that's important, it feels like you're swimming against the current of life because the gravitational pull of life takes us away from whatever is good for us. You can't escape it. I can't escape it. Not on our own. But see, that's the good news. See, this isn't a 21st century problem, and maybe what you've been rationalizing in your head is, well, this is a smartphone deal. You know, if I didn't have my smartphone or social media or the internet age, you know, just too many distractions, then this wouldn't be a problem. But this is a first century problem as well. And we actually have a letter written from an early follower of Jesus to a first century church that's about this problem of drifting. And so for the rest of my time today, that's what I want to talk about, is what the solution to this problem of drift really is, especially in our relationship with God. And so to do that, I want us to look at a letter, and it's collected in your Bible as the book of Hebrews, that was written by an early follower of Jesus to a church. So if you have a Bible, you can turn to Hebrews 3, or if you have it on your phone through the Bible app, or if you have the CCC app, you can go there. Or if you just want to look on the screen, we're going to put it up here for you as well. And what this verse really talks about is something that is core to what it means to be a follower of Jesus. It's really a core tenet of Christianity, that the current of life, the current of our culture is not going to pull us towards a better relationship with God. And so because that's true, it's just so easy to drift away from it and to not want to put the work into it. And so we weren't made to swim against that current on our own. We were made to swim together, to do our life together. And see, the power of life in a community, in a relationship like that, is that when I share my life with people who share my same values, who are swimming in the same direction that I am, towards the same destination that I am, it actually becomes easier to swim against the current of life. And in some ways, because we're all swimming in the same direction, we are actually changing the current around us. And no longer are we being pulled away from what is good for us. We are actually all being pulled towards what matters most to us. And so the writer of Hebrews writes to an early church, and he really wants us to understand the power of these kind of relationships, the power of what community, of swimming together really is. So let's look at this together. It's Hebrews 3, verse 12. See to it, brothers and sisters, that none of you has a sinful, unbelieving heart that turns away from the living God. And see, I think that last part's pretty impressive because I think most of us end up just reading past that, especially if you're a follower of Jesus. You just kind of blow over it like it's not that big of a deal because we really don't believe that that's possible for us. I mean, sure, we think things like, hey, I'm not going to be perfect at life. You know, I'm going to drift away from New Year's resolutions or a diet or paying off a debt. I might even slip up with anger and build some bad habits and mess up some relationships. But my relationship with God, I'm not going to turn away from that. I'm not going to mess that up. I mean, we can even understand that, you know, when you have a bad experience with the church or you have a bad experience, a very hurtful experience with Christians, which many of us have had, it makes sense to us that you would make even a conscious decision of, I'm never doing that again. I'm never putting myself in that position again. And if you're here today and that's kind of your history or that's kind of where you're at today, first, let me just say, we're so sorry that happened to you. It angers us that Those of us who follow Jesus sometimes are the people who don't give love and grace like we should, that we're often the people who push people away and hurt them. But we're also just so honored that you chose to give this whole church thing another chance with us today. We are honored by you being here. But what the writer of this verse is really trying to say to us is, this isn't unique to just having a bad experience. This isn't just unique to some of us. Everyone's heart is vulnerable to turning away from God. And the reason why is because it doesn't happen overnight. Like we've said, the drift is subtle. It's slow. You know, you grew up in church, or you started going to church at some point in your life, and you loved it, and you had a great relationship with God. And then all of a sudden, at least it seemed like, you didn't, and you couldn't explain it why. You know, you look back and maybe you went to college, or you got involved with a guy or a girl, or something happened with your kids or your marriage or your job, or just life just got busy and complicated, and no one intended it to happen, but it just became easy. It became natural to say, you know, we can't really do church every Sunday, you know? And before you know it, one Sunday turns into two and turns into more, and then what feels like all of a sudden, you're just not involved in anything. And you wouldn't have said it at the time because you still believed in God, but now on the other side of this, looking back, you'd say, yeah, I turned away from God, but it didn't happen overnight. And what the writer is saying is, that's where we're all at. I mean, we're all vulnerable to this kind of thing by saying, make sure, see to it, that none of you has a heart that turns away. What the writer is saying is that none of us are exempt. None of us are immune from the problem of drifting. So he tells us what the solution to this problem is in the next verse. He says, encourage one another as daily, as long as it is called today. And that last part really just means do not put this off. Do not act like this isn't a big deal. You need to realize that drifting away is a pressing need. It may not seem like a big deal in the moment. It may seem like it's just one Sunday. It may just seem like a little habit. It may just seem like a little flirting. It may just seem like a little relationship. But it all has the potential to lead us to eventually turning away from the living God. And see, the word that the writer uses here for encourage isn't the way we normally use it. You know, most of us think of encourage as that kind of pat on the back, you know, good job, slugger, you know, like when people used to say to me in Little League, good eye, which really just is when the ball came whizzing past my head at such a speed, I was so terrified I was never going to swing it in the first place. But you know what? It turned out it wasn't in the strike zone, so it didn't count against me, and everyone said, good eye. And I'm like, yes, I did have a good eye. Thanks for the encouragement. But that's not the kind of encouragement that this really means. The original context of this, of encourage, really means to beg, to plead, to appeal, to get in between another person and the thing that's causing them to drift and say, hey, I know you think this is none of my business, but I've got to talk to you. To see to it that no one drifts away. It's the kind of word that means I'm in close enough relationship with you that I can see what you can't see in yourself. I can see you drifting away, even when you can't see it. And I will do whatever it takes to keep that from happening. I'll have a tough conversation if that's what it means. I'll call you out on something, even if it's uncomfortable, even if you think it's not my business. I will beg with you. I will plead with you. I will do what it takes so you don't drift away. Do you have that? Someone who will beg with you, someone who will plead with you, someone who cares enough about you that they will get involved in the mess of your life, even when you're tempted to say, hey, back off. And they will beg with you, encourage you. So as this verse says, none of you may be hardened by sin's deceitfulness. Because that's what's at stake here. It's bigger than what you can see in the moment. It's bigger than a little habit. It's bigger than a relationship. What's at stake here is your heart becoming so hardened that eventually you turn away altogether from the living God. And no one is immune. If you were here a few months ago, we were in a series called Hot Mess. And what we said in that series is that all of us are one decision away from stupid. You remember that? That what starts as a momentary decision, what starts as a little habit, what starts with one drink, what starts with just 1 week of staying late at work, what starts with one website, what starts with a little bit of flirting at the office, what starts as just a little shopping spree, what starts as an occasional temper slip-up, what even starts as the occasional we're just so busy with the kids' activities, I don't think we can make it today. Eventually causes you to drift far enough away that the natural deceit of sin drifts into your heart. You begin lying to yourself, and slowly your heart becomes hardened to what God is doing in your life, and eventually you turn away altogether. And I know you think, yeah, but that's not going to happen to me. The reason why is because I can't see this in me, and you can't see this in you. Because if you remember, we learned in that same series that verse that said, the human heart is the most deceitful of all things and desperately wicked. Meaning we lie to ourselves. We rationalize our behavior. None of us, even all of us who think, oh yeah, I know myself better than that. None of us are introspective enough to see ourselves drifting away from what matters most. Because our hearts are deceitful. But see, I can see this in you, and you can see this in me, which means we need each other. This is why we're all about small groups around here. It's why we say things like, circles are better than rows. Because, see, in a row where you sit and you face forward to a very young, attractive speaker that everyone loves, who's very funny, no one can see what's going on in your life. No one can really know what's going on, and you can wear a mask, and you can pretend like everything's okay, and you can lie not only to yourself, but to all of us. You can do that for an hour. But when you sit in a circle, when you sit face to face with another person, when you sit across a dinner table from somebody, and you share your life, you share the details of what's going on in your marriage and your relationship with your kids and your job, someone has access to you. Someone knows what's going on in your life, and they can actually see things that you can't see. It has been invaluable to me as a young husband and father to have men in our church through our small groups and the discipleship program that we have and the serving teams that we're on who have taken time and actually have cared enough to build into me and to see things in me that I couldn't see in myself, who've had access enough to me to say, hey, Nathan, you keep complaining about this a lot. Have you talked to your wife about this? Because I'm not her. I can't fix this. Hey, Nathan, you seem really upset about this, and I think that anger is turning into bitterness and resentment. Are you going to do something about that? Are you going to forgive that person? Nathan, it really seems like your lust and your anger is controlling your mind. Nathan, don't get so busy with work that you can't get on the floor and play with your daughter so that you have influence with her and relationship with her, that when she moves out of your house, she wants to come back and see you and have relationship with you. That's been invaluable to me. Those are things people have said to me that I couldn't see in myself. It's been invaluable and an amazing thing to our marriage that my wife has had women in this church who have built into her and shown her things about herself and said, hey, this is what really matters as a wife, as a mother, as a woman of God. This is what matters most. Do not miss this. I wouldn't trade those things for anything. But that was only able to happen because we were able to say, we will give you access, even though this point in our life where with a 6-month-old daughter, everything seems controlled by her sleep schedule and her eat schedule and her poop schedule. Everything seems determined by that. We won't let that control our lives. We will get involved in small group and get in environments where people can have access into our lives. And if you're a parent of a kid under the age of 18, you need this for them. You want this for them. This is the idea that our children's and student ministry programs are really all about. It's what they're centered around. I'm the student minister for our church, and I see this over and over again, that what we do is we take your child anywhere between birth and the time they graduate high school, and we put them in environments where there are adults who can come alongside them and swim alongside them in life and have enough influence in their life that when they begin drifting away from the values that matter to you and matter to God, there are adults who are pushing them back in the right direction. You know, I see this over and over again. If you're a parent of a middle or high school student, you know that there's coming a point for every parent where the access and the influence you once had gets limited. It's why when you had a kid in elementary school, they wanted to come home from school and they wanted to tell you every detail of their day, no matter how dumb or how boring it was, they wanted to tell you. And now you've got a 13-year-old girl and she comes home from school and you say, hey, how was your day? And she goes, stop smothering me. And you're thinking, what happened? Well, part of that's natural and part of that's an independence thing. But as your access begins to get limited, if you can get them involved in environments in our family ministries where we have group leaders who volunteer to partner with you and swim alongside your students and invest in them the values of loving God and loving people, of having healthy relationships and healthy character traits and what it means to have a thriving relationship with God and His church, then everything changed, because when they stop listening to you, they still listen to our leaders. And what I've seen over and over again over the past few years is how we keep seeing, as we have students graduate high school and they go off to college or they move out and they just go into adulthood, a time where basically everyone drifts away from anything that is good and healthy and holy and legal for their lives. I see over and over again these students that we graduate from these programs, how the first thing they do when they go off to college or move out is they go, I need to make sure I'm involved in an environment, in a church, in a small group where someone can build into me so I don't have to go through the difficult transition of adulthood and independence on my own. You need that for your student. You want that for them. It is invaluable. So I will plead with you. I will beg with you. Get your students, get your children in these environments. Bring them every Sunday, even if you don't want to come every Sunday. Get them at our First Friday and Fifth Friday events. Get them at our retreats. Make sure that they are involved with these leaders, because you will not regret the time you spent making sure they had relationship with other adults, other leaders who can swim alongside your student and keep them from drifting. But this isn't just something that your kid needs. You need this as well. I need this as well. We need people in our lives who can identify the areas in which we are drifting away from what matters most because we cannot see it in ourselves. And I know the natural tendency is to begin to think, yeah, but I don't need this. And I know myself pretty well. I can keep myself, I can keep my family on the straight and narrow. I get there are people who need this, but it's not me. And I felt like this before too, but let me ask you this. Wasn't there a point in your life where you wished you had somebody who would swim alongside you and help you see what mattered most, when you first got married or in your first marriage or when you first had kids or when you first got that new job? Aren't there things that you look back at 5, 10 years ago, decisions that you made, and you say to yourself, if only I'd known then what I know now? Why couldn't I see it was a problem then? The reason why is you can't see it in yourself. And the truth is, you're making decisions right now that 5 years from now, 10 years from now, you're going to look back on and say, well, if only I'd known then what I know now. But you see, the beauty of community, the beauty of not going through life on your own is that you do not have to learn from your own mistakes. You can learn from the mistakes of other people who've gone before you. When you get together in small group, everyone brings something to the table. Everyone has different experiences. And we all can say to each other, hey, don't do what I did. Do that differently. Don't mess up your marriage like that. Don't mess up your kids like that. You can do better. You can do different. I mean, don't you wish your dad had this? Don't you wish there were guys who came alongside him and just said, hey, man, don't miss this. Don't mess up your marriage or your kids or your family. Don't drift away from what matters most to you. Don't you wish your dad had that? Don't you wish your mom had that? Don't you wish your boss had something like that for dealing with employees? Don't you wish your ex-husband had that? Your ex-wife? I know you wish your kids had that. And so, if everyone else in your life needs this but you don't, isn't that a little hypocritical? Isn't it a little arrogant to think, but I know myself better than that. I'm not going to let that happen to my marriage, my family. None of us are immune from this. None of us are exempt from the problem of drifting. The only way to fix it is to make sure that none of us have to swim against the current of life on our own. To get in environments where people can encourage us and we can encourage others to not have a heart that turns away from the living God. So, if you would take out your connection card that we asked you to fill out earlier, and if you haven't, go ahead and put your name on that. We're not going to use that information to do anything weird. I want to talk to you about, on the back of that card, what your next step is for today. There's really only 2 for this week, and the first is just to say, I'll do this. I'll allow someone else to have access to my life. I will get in a small group so I don't drift away from what matters most. And if you do that and you check that box and you put in the offering when it comes by in a few minutes, we're going to contact you this week about Group Link, which is next Sunday night. It's this amazing event. I did it last year when we did it, and it is a great chance for you to, one, just to see what small group is like, but also you get to meet people and you get to pick what small group you're going to be a part of. So if you meet a weirdo with a beard, you might go, I don't want to be in group with him, and that's okay because there's other people, and you can kind of choose who the people who are going to swim alongside you will be. And if you come here regularly and you call CCC your home, but you've never done a small group or you're not currently in a small group, let me encourage you, let me beg with you to check that box. I hope you'll do that. Now, I know some of you are here for the first time, or you're new to this church and you're just trying to investigate it and you're thinking, whoa, slow down. That's too much. I do not want to jump into all that. That's okay. Maybe the most honest thing you can do is just check the box that says, I'll come back next week. We want you to be able to investigate at your own pace, so please do that, and please put your name on it. We're not going to use this information to bother you. We simply just want to pray for you this week. We love to pray over all of these cards. But I hope for most of us that this will be the time that we actually say it, that we actually do it, that I will not go through this alone. I will get into relationships where I can be encouraged, and I can encourage others so that no one has to have a heart that drifts away from the living God. Will you bow and pray with me? Heavenly Father, I personally am so thankful for the gift of community that you've given us, this ability that we don't have to go through life on our own, that we don't have to swim against the current of life on our own, that there are people who will come alongside us and swim with us. God, I pray for everyone listening to this that you would move in their hearts and you would allow them to have the courage to follow through on this, to get in a small group, to get in environments where other people can build into them. We are so thankful for your Son. It's in his name we pray. Amen.